if you have known anybody who has had serious cancer and wasting away from the cancer, and you haven't seen them for a few months, and now you see them, and you look at them like, oh my gosh, what happened? What you're probably looking at is cachexia, the wasting away, and it's the body producing sugar from proteins. Your body will produce sugar from the proteins inside of it, not from carbohydrates or fats, but from proteins. It's a process called glycogenesis. It's called gluconeogenesis, where your body will take proteins and turn them into sugars.
I was just asked the other day by someone new to us if I was the Forbidden Doctor. Well, of course, I said no. The Forbidden Doctor is not me at all.
We are not the Forbidden Doctor. Jack is not the Forbidden Doctor. It's in you.
The Forbidden Doctor is that magical, mystical power inside of you that is controlling and healing everything.
It's that beautiful, marvelous, almost miraculous force that controls all healing.
It's that innate intelligence, that life force-directed influence that triggered your DNA to guide the building of your body after conception.
Yeah, it's that power that sustains your life, repairs your wounds and lesions, and it never stops working. It's that essential part of you that keeps you alive and heals your every hurt.
This is the Forbidden Doctor. It's not me. It's that part of you the powers that be have decreed forbidden to ever learn about or even consider, and never ever rely upon. For it is forbidden that you even know this life force exists at all.
You are your own Forbidden Doctor.
Yes.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jack, and welcome back to the Forbidden Doctor podcast. This is podcast episode 183, The Hostile Legal Environment for Breast Cancer. Today we're going to talk to you about the incredible, dare we say, criminal and purposefully withheld from you alternative treatments for breast cancer. To quote Dr. Gonzales, "We no longer accept patients with localized breast cancer who do not proceed with recommended surgical procedures. Our decision has not been dictated by a negative clinical experience, but rather the extraordinarily hostile legal environment that exists for alternative practitioners such as ourselves. Standard of care criteria require a woman to undergo aggressive surgery, and the world would need a consciousness shift before we would consider taking on such patients again." What you're going to hear is an excerpt from one of my local radio shows addressing this very subject. I particularly want to be able to get into cancer, a little bit about cancer this morning, because it obviously is very fresh on everybody's mind as it constantly. But if you were listening to the last hour here at K-Talk Radio, that was yesterday's show with Doug Live. I don't know why it was replaying again. I just got a hold of the Radio America and asked them about what the heck is going on here, and they have no idea. They didn't know what I was talking about because I noticed the Doug Steffen thing was repeating itself. That's awfully strange because that was not coming from the Radio America network. Well, anyway, on with the show. Thanks very much to my son, Dr. Josh, for covering the show last week, talking about the carnivore diet. Stirred up a lot of controversy, as it should. There are so many crazy ideas out there in the workplace and in American consciousness right now regarding diets and nutrition that it's hard anymore to find your way, which is why we have the Forbidden Doctor and the symptom survey that we offer at forbiddendoctor.com to help clear through the muddled confusion that exists with every wind of doctrine being blown about. So, I would recommend you go to forbiddendoctor.com, click on the symptom survey, take it, and you will be pleasantly surprised at the amount of information and attention you get as a result of that at no cost to you. So I'm going to talk about cancer here in a moment, but first, why I was not here last week, because Mary and I were back in Knoxville, Tennessee, up in the mountains, getting ready to take advantage of something that is going to come into America like a steamroller. And just as this cashback that you've heard me talk about before is in its infancy, primal infancy, mind you, the cashback today is where Bitcoin was when it was 7 cents, and now it's over 10,000. It's where Amazon Prime was a number of years ago when it first came out, and people laughed at it. Now almost everybody has Amazon Prime. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, nor would Mary be doing this, unless we knew this was going to explode. I simply don't have time to fool around with this anymore. Next month, I will be 69. I can't remember ever feeling better than I feel now, incidentally. I get up every morning super early, got plenty of energy. I'm either in here or I go to my clinic right after here and see 50, 60 people today, as I did the last 2 days in a row. And I have stumbled across something I'm telling you I have never seen anywhere in my life before. And it's in its infancy. This is below ground level. It isn't even at ground level yet. I mean, this is where the surveyors are looking out the piece of property to decide where to put what, according to the blueprint. So if you want to be part of something that will involve 100 million Americans by 2024, 5 years from now, there is a wave that is coming to America. And this app, most of the shopping that people do, 80% of the shopping is done in the big box stores. And this app, you can use this app now to be shopping and saving money. But unlike Uber, we need to get the mom and pop stores signed up for cashback. We want to help the mom and pop businesses. Now, you remember Uber. When Uber first, or you know about Uber, and you may even have Uber on your phone as we do. It's less than half, in most cases, the cost of a regular taxi cab. And it spread like wildfire once it caught on. But they didn't start offering Uber service at the beginning. They had to create the Uber network first. They had to find the drivers. And so that was the original impetus of that entire program that was so successful. Others came along, like Lyft. Even more will be showing up. But what they couldn't just tell everybody, well, get on your phone and download the Uber app and then schedule a pickup. Because the pickup may be 17 days away because there was only a few drivers at the first. So they didn't really push the marketplace into the drivers or the riders as much as they did the drivers, because they had to have the driving network set up first. That's kind of where cashback is now. And I don't say this lightly. I mean, you can make more money than you can imagine by getting involved now, and it costs you nothing. I mean, I wouldn't be interested in this myself otherwise. I mean, how would you like to make $25,000 a month within 6 months of starting? I have seen people do this. And what full-time job after working there 6 months is going to be making you $25,000 a month? Now, I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot of things that come down the pike. A lot of things have been presented to me. I have never, ever seen anything like this before. Never. So Mary and I are looking only for the best of the best. You'll be working closely with us daily. There are no monthly fees. There is no product to buy. There are no auto ships. There is no you have to do this or you have to do that. You just have to get people to shop within the network. Like I said, all the big box stores are there. The gasoline stores are there. The grocery stores are there. The clothing stores are there. The home repair stores are there. The auto repair stores are there. They're all there to take advantage of now. But we are definitely interested in signing up small businesses, signing up mom and pop stores. This will bring a new line of clientele to you as soon as we can get this going. Now, you can go to www.whynotgetcashback.com. There's some new videos there.
watch the videos, but I need a team within a week. You're going to be working directly with me, possibly daily, and Mary as well. And who am I looking for? I'm not looking for everybody. Believe me that. I'm looking for someone who just longs for the immensity of the sea, that has the passion to change their life. They're not worried about the the why, the how. You can learn the how. You can't teach somebody the why. You can't teach somebody the passion that I'm talking about. You have it or you don't. And the vision to understand what I'm talking about. That's who I'm looking for. Someone who longs for the immensity of the sea, not even knowing yet how to build a boat. But they know they just have to get out there. And we're particularly, well, Mary, let me use her as an example, thought if she had found this when she was single, she would have been just fine. She had 5 kids, a single mom, paying a $2,000 a month mortgage, running a couple of businesses, struggling as best she could. If she had this back then, she would be so well off today, she would need nothing from anyone. Now, as I said, I wouldn't do this unless I knew this was going to explode. And I need about 6 generals to work with me very closely. Now, the reality is that you're going to have this app on your phone eventually. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but you will before too long, because it's going to take over this country as it did Europe. And now you can make some money at this, or, later when your favorite stores are passing these cards out, then, of course, it'll be too late. It'll be too late to realize the good income that this can create. And this is not some pyramid thing. This is not based on some people coming in now paying money, because you don't pay money. You just get people to shop inside the network. That's it. There is no product to buy. In fact, Eric Worre, a well-known person inside of network marketing, said Cashback World has simply cracked the code of network marketing. Yeah. Why? Because there's no product. And the people at the top, it's not like people at the top, it's people off to the side. I mean, you don't build your stuff on the investment of somebody underneath you. Those days are over with. And if you're in network marketing now, you may want to take a look at this, because if you don't, your downline will. And according to the Federal Trade Commission, there are only 7 legal network marketing outfits inside the country. And Cashback World is one of them. All right, I will mention some more about this later, but I definitely want to get into some cancer. 16 minutes after the hour. And I want to mention this because we don't, in our clinic, we don't treat cancer. We offer nutritional advice to people who have cancer in the same sense that we offer nutritional advice to people who don't have cancer. I'm working with some people now with advanced diabetes, and I saw the fellow again yesterday who's lost almost 50 pounds. His diabetes medication is virtually in half. He looked at me yesterday almost with tears in his eyes. I feel the best I have felt in years. And I've probably been working on it for about 6 weeks. And it's easy to change the path you're on when the passion is there to do it. And that's why I brought the word passion into talking about cashback, as I was talking about here a minute ago. Oh, let me mention one more thing. Why not get cashback.com? Take a look at it. Oh, and then also you can text me if you don't have access to a computer right away. If you will text me, I will get back to you personally. 801-810-6029. 801-810-6029. If you're tired of your life-sucking job, or if you're looking for something else to supplement what you're doing now without investment on your part, you may want to take a look at this. If you will text me, 801-810-6029, 6029. I will get back to you and explain to you in more detail what there's no time and not enough time on the radio to do. All right, so what is the favorite food of cancer? A lot of you, of course, already know that. A great primer on how cancer cells feed and what they'll do to the body in order to get glucose. They have to survive. I mean, if you know that cancer needs sugar, does it make sense to feed cancer sugar? Does it make sense to eat a high carbohydrate meal when you have cancer. You see, cancer has a sweet tooth. It has no desire for proteins. It has no desire for fats because it does not have the physiology of a cancer cell to actually process it, because cancer cells are incredibly immature, undifferentiated, undeveloped, and hate oxygen. They love sugar. They hate oxygen. And how do we know this? From the work of Otto Warburg from back in the 1930s, who went after his research work. And many of you, if you've studied cancer history, cancer research, and you've looked into the work of Otto Warburg, he won 2 Nobel Prizes in medicine and physiology over this. And anyone who's been to med school, anyone who's been to chiropractic school, I'm sure anyone who's been to naturopathy schools, know all about Otto Warburg's discoveries. And it's a discovery of humongous proportions, because way back, even as late as the 50s, he discovered the main biochemical cause of cancer. Now, the biochemical cause, there are many causes of cancer. And even to this day, modern medicine and the war on cancer will tell you, well, we don't know what causes cancer. Well, of course they do. But when they tell you we don't know what causes cancer, they can get away with telling you we don't know how to cure it. We only know how to address it. See, the power is in the words. You can control an entire culture if you can control the language. And because of court decisions, medicine controls the language regarding cancer and most medical procedures. That's why alternative health care gets such a bad rap from medicine, because it's the decision that we do in our clinic, is difficult sometimes with some people, what we want to do with this patient or another, because of the extraordinarily hostile legal environment that exists for alternative practitioners. And I don't use the word hostile lightly. Anytime somebody starts making some real inroads with healing and nutrition and anything of an alternative nature, the law comes down on them like a ton of bricks. All right, we'll be right back after the break. I want to pick this up because cancer has only one prime cause, physiologically. I'll get to that in a minute. This Wednesday morning, the 18th day of September, it is 25 minutes after the hour, and I want to pick up where I left off there a few moments ago with the idea about Otto Warburg's discoveries. And again, I want to make a point of the fact that he won 2 Nobel Prizes. Now, somebody coming up with this information today is not going to win a Nobel Prize, because they just as soon keep this information as quiet as possible now. But the big discovery that Otto Warburg made was this: the main biochemical cause of cancer, or what differentiates a cancer from a stem cell from becoming a healthy, normal cell. Now, the understanding of cancer today is that we know that it comes from stem cells. The old idea that cancer is just, old man cells that just kind of go rogue and go crazy and forget what they're all about, they're beginning to realize that's not the case. Stem cells are the cells that your body was absolutely filled with by the time of your birth. Your umbilical cord was full of stem cells. In fact, there's a lot of controversy in stem cell research out there now, because they want to be able to take the stem cells that are coming out of aborted babies from the umbilical cords. Now, that sounds uncomfortable to you. It sounds uncomfortable to me, too. I'm not too happy about it. In fact, there's a horrible, terrible, horrendous market out there in other countries for this source, because they know what those stem cells are capable of doing. So when you are born, and the fellow that discovered this, John Beard, back over 120 years ago, he called them vagabond cells, because they just they're spread throughout the entire body. You have stem cells in your heart. They're in your lung. They're in your liver. They're in your kidneys. They're in all your organs. And what a stem cell does is when it's triggered to develop, it will become a cell like its host environment. Stem cell in the heart will become a heart cell. A stem cell in the liver will become a liver cell. There are local factors that are released to trigger a stem cell in the kidney to become a kidney cell. Now, what they've discovered over the last 20 years, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of cancer people who simply haven't awakened to the fact that it's 2019. But the research is clearly showing these stem cells, when they are triggered into development, do not move past their undifferentiated state. In other words, they stay as they were, as kind of just sitting there dormant, waiting for the signal. But they get some kind of a signal that causes them to grow rapidly, but they don't differentiate into the host material. A stem cell in the liver does not become a liver, an active hepatocyte, a liver cell. And so some kind of a carcinogen triggers this to take place. And there's a lot of carcinogens. There's over 5,000 of them now that exist in our world that have been discovered. And when these things amass in the body and the body's ability to clean itself out is hampered to some degree, coupled with a high carbohydrate diet, then you're a sitting duck, because Warburg's discovery tells us that, first off, it tells us that these cells metabolize in a different way than a normal cell does, because a normal cell needs oxygen. And cancer cells despise oxygen. In fact, oxygen therapy is a favorite among many of the alternative clinics that exist out there if you research this topic. That's why there are some clinics out there using H2O2, hydrogen peroxide, ozone therapy, things like this that provide a lot of oxygen. But I'm not talking about that. That's another matter. But another thing that Warburg's work tells us is that cancer metabolizes through a process of fermentation. I mean, if you've ever made wine or you ever made home brew, you know that fermentation requires sugar to take place. If you've ever made homemade bread, you know the same thing. That yeast that you mix in with the flour requires sugar for the fermentation of the carbon dioxide to take place. Also, the metabolism of cancer is approximately 8 times greater, faster than the metabolism of a normal cell. So here is where you can start putting this stuff together. And root beer. I mean, somebody, even if you make homemade root beer, you're going through the process of fermentation. Now, the body is constantly overworked trying to feed the cancer that's inside of it. And the cancer is constantly on the verge of starvation, and it's constantly asking the body to feed it. And when the food supply is cut off, the cancer begins to starve, unless it can make the body produce the sugar that it needs to survive. There's some interesting biochemical processes that happen, and a lot of this comes out of the research archives at Johns Hopkins University Cancer Archive. I mean, they've known this for a long time now. This isn't something that showed up last week in some medical journal. And there's when I was in school being taught about cancer, there's a term called cachexia. It's C-A-C-H-E-X-I-A, cachexia. It's a wasting syndrome. It's where if you look at somebody, I'm getting ahead of myself. If you have known anybody who has had serious cancer and wasting away from the cancer, and you haven't seen them for a few months, and now you see them, and you look at them like, oh my gosh, what happened? What you're probably looking at is cachexia, the wasting away. And it's the body producing sugar from proteins. Your body will produce sugar from the proteins inside of it, not from carbohydrates or fats, but from proteins. It's a process called glycogenesis. It's called gluconeogenesis. where your body will take proteins and turn them into sugars. And this sugar will feed the cancer, and the body finally dies of starvation trying to feed the cancer, let alone the impact it has on toxicity with the liver and the kidneys, and toxicity that occurs in other parts of the body. But the body slowly starves to death because the body is taking everything it has to feed this cancer, because the cancer has hormonal chemical messengers to tell the body, feed me. Because the body can't recognize it as not self. Because where did it come from? It came from self. So the reason that food therapies for cancer even exist today, I mean, beyond the fact that they actually work in many cases, is that someone once saw the light, the connection between sugar and cancer. And there's a lot of different food therapies, but not a single one allows many foods high in carbohydrates. And not a single one allows sugars, because sugar feeds cancer. So anytime I get a question about this from patients, so-and-so's got cancer, what can you do for him? Well, I can tell them where to go to learn more information. That's about all I can do for them, because I'm not a cancer doctor. And because of the hostile, aggressive treatment of alternative healthcare professionals like myself by the existing pharmaceutical-driven healthcare system, you have to be, and I don't often use the word damn on my show, but you have to be damn careful about what you say or do, or you're going to be locked up for 20 years. But I do tell them to go off sugar. Now, has your physician told you this? Those of you who are listening now who have cancer or have had cancer or know somebody that's had cancer, did your physician tell you to stop eating cancer immediately? I have been in the hospital, not very recently, but in the past, visiting some patients who had cancer, were being treated for cancer. I have patients who are being treated for heart disease, and I've been in there visiting them. I have had some patients with children up at primary, children in desperate conditions. I have gone to visit them while they're in their hospital rooms, and I look at the food they're being served. Sugar, 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 sugar. When Rourke was in the hospital for about 10 days back in 2015 because of an infection that developed in his sinuses, the nutrition center, and it actually said nutrition center on the door. Well, it was right next to his room. That's how we happened to see it. And we thought, oh my goodness, thank goodness they have a nutrition center here. And we went into the room. 2 slushy machines, sugar-laced cereals, little packets of macaroni and cheese, just add hot water. It was sugar, 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 sugar was their nutrition center. And the slushies were going 24 hours. If your child woke up in the middle of the night with dry throat or anything, as they would because of the medicine side effects, you could go get them a slushie. Sugar not only is a food for cancer, it suppresses the immune response. There's something called the phagocytic test, where you test the activity of the phagocytes, the white blood cells that eat the bad guys, including cancer cells. And in the phagocytic test, they found out that various levels of sugar not only slow down the white blood cells from attacking the enemy, it would paralyze them for up to 2 to 3 days, depending on the amount of sugar. So why doesn't your physician tell you this? Why doesn't your doctor, when you're sick, say, get off all sugar? If you go in there with serious cardiovascular problems, mostly brought on, and I say mostly because it's usually not a clot. It's usually the buildup of lactic acid inside the myocardium that causes a heart cramp that leads to a heart attack. More than half the heart attacks do not have a clot, or there's no thrombosis involved at all. And the worst thing you could be doing at this point is consuming any sugar, because it's going to build up to more lactic acid. Lactic acid, the same thing that causes a cramp in your calf muscle, is the thing that's causing the heart attack in the myocardium in your heart. Now, I could go out in the woods with this, but I want to get back to this thing about why doesn't your physician tell you to get the hell off of sugar when you're sick? Well, it's hard to tell. Maybe because your doctor feels it's his job to cure your cancer, not yours. Maybe it's your doctor's mission to cure your heart disease, not yours. Maybe because your doctor learned about Warburg, but never put it together, never placed nutrition into the equation. The last time I researched this, The only medical school in America that has a required class in nutrition. It's a 1-hour introduction. Is the medical school at the University of Colorado. All the rest of them, they're electives. And usually it's just an introduction, kind of an idea. This is a vitamin. This is a carbohydrate. This is a fat. This is a protein. This is an enzyme. But don't worry about it because it has nothing to do with the way you're going to practice medicine. Which is why you'll hear certain physicians saying, hey, all food is good. Just, try to be balanced. That kind of a thing. But I suspect mainly because your physician never studied nutrition. I mean, as late as 1978, the American Medical Association's official position that was stated in courts of law, you can research this as I did, was that nutrition has nothing to do with health or disease. As late as 1978, that was the official position of the AMA, that nutrition has nothing to do with health or disease. So, those who've paid attention to this sugar-craving cancer stuff have come up with some remarkable therapies for cancer. Laetrile, the extract from apricot seeds is just one. There's another one that some clinics I've learned about in Mexico, hydrazine sulfate, because it stops gluconeogenesis. In almost, more than half of the patients who show up at these Mexican clinics with cachexia, just hydrazine sulfate. You can't use that in America, but you can use it in Mexico. I was recently saw an article out of the University of Minnesota. They're experimenting with this type of chemotherapy that's delivered in something called a smart bomb. Here's how it works. The drug, the chemo drug, is wrapped up in a coating that stays intact as it travels through the body until it reaches an area of the body where there's extremely low levels of oxygen. And when it reaches this no oxygen location, the coating comes apart. And the chemotherapy is released at that point to destroy the cancer, because the only place in your body where there is no oxygen is in the cancer site. And then there are food therapies that are aimed at starving cancer and, and knowing what cancer loves, the patient just simply avoids them. Cancer loves cooked foods, especially commercial plants and fruits. This is a relatively recent finding, but cancer loves sugar. Where do you get sugar? Anything that did not have a face or came from something that had a face is a sugar. It's a carbohydrate. Vegetables, carbohydrates. Fruits, carbohydrates. These are the foods that have to be eliminated. What's that leave? Meat, fish, dairy, and eggs, and some spices. Cheese, eggs, meat, fish, dairy, eggs, and some spices. Now, people with cancer will develop a very powerful sweet tooth. They'll have a craving for sugar that they don't normally have.
Many of you may be finding us for the first time. Keep in mind, the protocols on our website and what we are talking about are only available to logged-in users. But you can create an account instantly by taking our free no-obligation symptom survey at forbiddendoctor.com. Understand the survey saves you money in the long run because you're not going to be taking supplements you don't need. And all of this at no charge to you. And if you would like 20% off all the time, join our VIP membership. Just go to forbiddendoctor.com/VIP to listen to a short video on the benefits. And let's start your healing process today.
Listening to Jack Stockwell radio talk show program, talking about cancer, talking about sugar. And the doctor is definitely in today, let me tell you. I want to get to a press release that came out in 1998. That would be 21 years ago, from Johns Hopkins University Hospital. I'll get to that here in just a few moments. But I want to finish up with what I was saying about Otto Warburg and conventional medicine, because conventional medicine officially states that the prime cause of cancer is still unknown. What's very interesting is that in 1931, when Warburg won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for his discovery of a certain enzyme that allows the oxygen transfer inside of cell respiration. Cellular respiration is how cells breathe in and out. That's all it is. Now, cells, of course, are in a completely heavy, saturated fluid environment. And but the way oxygen moves in and out of a cell is referred to as cellular respiration. And he discovered the enzyme that had a lot to do with that and the prime cause of cancer cells, which was an inadequate, improper oxygenation that was simply replaced because the cancer cells have a will to survive every bit as much as you do with glucose fermentation, the fermentation of sugar, byproduct being carbon dioxide. Cancer cells don't live on oxygen. And he got a second Nobel Prize about another decade later for his discovery of the active group, another energy transferring enzyme process. And the prime cause of cancer is the replacement in his second study of the oxidation of sugar in normal body cells by the fermentation of sugar, which is a much simpler thing because for sugar to oxidize in a cell requires a certain function of a normal cell to take the glucose and be able to extract through glycolysis and then the Krebs cycle the energy that's brought into that cell in the form of glucose, which is the form of sugar in the bloodstream. When you ferment it, you bypass a lot of those processes simply and you have to ferment it for a cancer cell because a cancer cell doesn't have those processes. So when the gas, oxygen, which of course is a gas, which is how animals and plants get their energy, is completely removed from the physiology of the cancer cell and is replaced by an energy-yielding reaction of the lowest living forms. The single-celled stuff, which is the fermentation of sugar. The fermentation of sugar has been around for a very, very long time. As long as there's been plants, there's fermentation of sugar. And so when this takes place, the normal cellular function stops, and now, with the quick release of energy through the fermentation of sugar, cancer cells have an abundant form of energy, a food source, so they have a metabolism, as I said earlier, that's 8 times greater than a normal cell. And they need more and more and more and more energy all the time. So when the normal cellular respiration of a stem cell disappears, the cell doesn't die. It just remains in its primitive form because the meaning of how the cell lives changes. It's not living like a normal cell anymore. It's living like an abnormal cell, and it needs sugar to do that. Cancer cells are simply anaerobic, which means they will derive their energy without needing oxygen. Now, in 1998, there's a couple of people holding on. I'll get you here in just a second. In 1998, this press release came out of Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. The hematologist there, Dr. Chi Dang, D-A-N-G, was discussing his famous study that demonstrated that cancerous cells simply self-destruct when deprived of their main fuel, the sugar glucose. And while his report was big news to the conventional medical world, it would have come as no surprise to a lot of nutrition researchers of the mid-20th century, 40 years, 50 years earlier, especially to a cancer expert, a Dr. Quigley of the University of Nebraska School of Medicine, who once proclaimed that no cancer patient he had ever treated showed any material improvement in their cachectic condition unless the diet was so rearranged that sugar, glucose, disappeared absolutely 100% from the urine. And sadly, Dr. Dang from Johns Hopkins does not appear to even consider the obvious implications of both his and Dr. Quigley's work that cancer might be effectively treated by the simple nutritional therapy of eliminated refined carbohydrates from the diet. But instead, keep pushing for a pharmaceutical drug as a solution to the glucose problem. So we had an employee who worked for us for a while, and his father had stomach cancer. And he did everything he could to try to get his father to understand what he had learned in our clinic about cancer, especially the stopping of sugar. And he was a patient of the Huntsman Cancer Center, and his diet was given to him by a dietitian at the Huntsman Cancer Center. It was full of sugar, chocolate chips, fruits and heavy syrup, spoonfuls of sugar. The exact opposite of what he should have been fed. And so cancer research knows that cancer cells live on fermented sugar, but they're trying to come up with a drug that stops that fermentation process. I don't know whether to laugh or cry when I hear stuff like that. And there's this repeated misconception that exists out there that runs rampant in both conventional and alternative healthcare, that the human brain can only use glucose as fuel, that the body has to have sugar because the brain can only use glucose. And since we know that that's not true since the 60s, fat derivatives can be used just as well, the ketones, if not better. The brain will function better on ketones than it will glucose. It still continues to be purported today by even the most educated practitioners that the brain has to have glucose in order to function correctly, when that is absolutely false. Another quick word about cashback that I started the show with. You can get more information about it at whynotgetcashback.com. But how would you like to be making, I've seen people do this, $25,000 a month within 6 months of starting. What full-time job after working there 6 months will make $25,000 a month? I've been around for a long time. I've seen a lot of things. I've never seen anything like this before. So I'm asking, if you want to be part of something that's going to involve 100 million Americans by 2024, based on this wave coming to America, based on what's happened in Europe with this process for the last 16 years. You can text me personally at 801-810-6029. My wife, Mary, you'll probably hear her voice, but you can leave a message. And I'm looking only for the best of the best. You'll be working closely with me. You can go to whynotgetcashback.com and watch some videos and see what I'm talking about. But you can text that number. And of course, if you text that number, 801-810-6029, you're not going to hear a voice. You can leave a text. We can get back to you. I'm looking for someone who longs for the immensity of the sea and simply has the passion to get up, get on their feet, and change their life, and has the vision to understand what in the world I'm talking about. Cashback today is where Bitcoin was when it was 7 cents. It's where Amazon Prime was when everybody laughed at it. And I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't know this was going to explode. The reality is you're eventually going to have this app on your phone. You might as well do it now when you can make some money off of it, because eventually the big box stores will be passing them out to everybody, and then that opportunity will be gone. All right, caller, you're on the Stockwell Show. Whoop. I don't know if I have I got your phone turned on. You still there?
Is that me?
I think it's you.
Hey, good to hear. Good to hear you, Dr. Stockwell, back on the air. I have a quick question.
Yep.
When you said cutting out sugars, was that refined sugars or
any sugar.
Even fruits?
Fruits, vegetables, any sugar has got to go if you have cancer.
Okay, then what?
It leaves meat, fish, dairy, eggs.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
That sounds pretty good. Thank you, sir.
You bet, buddy.
Bye.
Caller, you're on the Stockwell Show.
Hey, Jack, it's Michelle. How are you?
Fine, Michelle.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, though, because at one time they were trying to tell me they wanted me to go have tests because they thought I had that, and I did other things. I kind of ran. But I did do the B12. After a while, I did cut green apples into my diet because there's so much fiber in them that the pancreas will break those down so slowly that your body can usually use that. I just wondered what your take was on this.
Well, the point I'm trying to make here is the point that's come out of Johns Hopkins and Minnesota Cancer Research Centers, that sugar stops the biological processes of a cancer cell. It absolutely cuts them off, and it destroys them and causes them to suffer and die. And you can do it slowly or you can do it fast. You can cut back on your sugar intake and allow the cancer to continue to survive to some degree, or you can stop all sugar, period. And both these research centers have been very clear on what they've had to say about this. Now, I'm talking about the lack of sugar, of course. The lack of sugar is what starves a cancer cell. They are so primitive they cannot live on carb or on fats and proteins like the rest of your cells do. And when you cut out sugar, you go into a ketosis state anyway, and the fat that is in your diet, the fat that's in your body, is being broken down into ketones, and these ketones are a tremendous source of energy. But cancer cells are too primitive to use the energy that's in a ketone, and your brain can work just fine without any sugar. So I'm going to... Now, fiber, as you had mentioned there, Michelle, fiber included with your food slows down the process of absorbing the sugar, but the sugar's still going to get absorbed. It's just absorbed more slowly. And depending on... there are cancer therapies out there like the Gerson that is, fruits and vegetables and no meat whatsoever. There's other kinds of cancer that on a Gerson therapy will actually get 10 times worse and kill you even faster. There are cancer therapies out there that are nothing but raw meat. It depends an awful lot on your metabolic balance and where your blood comes from. What part of the world is your genetic origin?
And do you agree that toxins and our minds are so powerful? I've actually seen a video where they hook somebody up with a stage 4 bladder cancer, and it shrinks to 0 in 3 minutes.
What did?
So their bladder cancer, stage 4 bladder cancer.
What caused the shrinking?
The power of the mind, energy work.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Okay, so people need to know that 60% of their health comes from what's in their head. So if their brains are toxic and they have toxins coming in, but I agree with you. Number one is sugar. Sugar will feed that cancer once you have it.
Yeah. Well, let me end this with Anita Moorjani's book, Dying to Be Me, and the Power of the Mind. And then we also have a podcast, I think it's podcast 101 at forbiddendoctor.com, that we go into great detail the power of the mind to instantaneously heal the body. So through the concept of epigenetics. I've got to go. Thank you for those phone calls. And we're going to go to the news, and I'll be back right after. 6 minutes after the top of the hour, you're listening to the Jack Stockwell radio talk show program this morning. The doctor is in. Been talking about cancer and sugar. I've got more things that I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about Dr. Gonzales. Dr. Nicholas Gonzales passed away 2 years ago. Mysteriously, I might add. And he has published some books on the enzyme treatment for cancer. And he's published a book, which I have in my possession, of 50 dramatic cases of advanced cancer and the effect that the enzyme treatment of cancer had upon these cancers. The enzyme treatment of cancer has a long history. It's more than 100 years old. It began with the work of Dr. John Beard, a professor at the University of Edinburgh, who in 1902 first proposed that the pancreatic proteolytic enzyme trypsin might represent a very powerful anti-cancer tool inside our own body. Now, Beard, who was an embryologist, detoured into cancer research as a result of his studies of the mammalian placenta and its similarity in its development to malignant cancers. In other words, the development of the human placenta, or any mammalian placenta, which is how the developing fetal tissue that becomes a baby extracts its energy and its life source from the walls of the uterus, through the placenta, through the umbilical cord, into the fetus. And the development of that placenta following conception developed exactly the way a malignant cancer cell develops. Now, there's an incredible story to this, because he was the first one to report that in many respects, the placenta in its earliest form would behave like a tumor. And it begins growing as a very undifferentiated offshoot from the primitive embryo, like in human development. The blastocyst becomes something, as the sperm and egg come together and they form the blastocyst that forms the morula. And morula is Latin for mulberry, because under a microscope, it looks like a tiny mulberry. And it splits into two things. The outer shell becomes the placenta. The inner shell becomes the life form. And the same way this developed, it quickly, by the invasion of the uterus the placenta into the uterine wall, much like a tumor, will infiltrate the host tissue of an organ, lung, liver, kidney, whatever else. And initially, the cells of the placenta proliferate almost without control. I mean, as tumors are known to do. Even in Beard's day, 1902, it quite efficiently would produce a very dense blood supply very quickly, a requirement for any rapidly growing malignancy, as angiogenesis research today has made clear. In other words, cancer cells release a chemical messenger that causes angiogenesis, the creation of blood vessels, because cancer cells need blood to get the glucose to ferment the sugar. So as in any normal development would proceed, at some predetermined point, the placenta would transform from this highly invasive, rapidly growing, blood vessel producing tumor-like tissue to the non-invasive, non-proliferating, mature placenta. Now, there was a moment where, bingo, like a light switch, it stopped its invasive, rapid proliferation growth to just mature tissue that just did the job it was designed to do. Beard claimed, the only difference between the placenta and the malignant growth, according to Dr. Beard, was that the placenta knows when to stop growing. Tumors don't know when to stop growing. And so he concluded in his work that the key to the change lay in the embryonic pancreas. Interestingly enough, and the pancreas has many functions, but two primary functions, is it produces proteolytic, in other words, it produces enzymes that break up proteins, and it produces insulin. But in the fetal pancreas, before the pancreas is born, why is it producing protein digesting enzymes when there's no protein in the digestive system? It hasn't started eating and will not eat until after birth. Its first food, mother's milk, loaded with proteins and fats. So he concluded that witnessing this in every species that he studied, the day the placenta stops its cancer-like invasion of the mother is the very day the embryonic pancreas becomes active and begins pouring out enzymes into the bloodstream. Now, even in his day, this is more than 100 years ago, the main categories of pancreatic enzymes had already been identified. The proteolytic or the as I said, the protein digesting components, the lipases, which hydrolyze the fats, that allow the fats to mix with water. That's what hydrolyze means. And the amylases that are responsible for cutting up the complex carbohydrates into sugar and easy usable sugars. And the physiologists of his time, through all three, thought that all three groups were active only in the duodenum, the beginning of the small intestine, where the enzymes continue the breakdown of the food that is arriving from the stomach. But Beard was able to provide the data that illustrated that above and beyond this function, trypsin, which is the main proteolytic enzyme, seemed to control the placental growth, and it prevented the tissue from invading beyond the uterus as a true cancer would do. There is a very powerful cancer, endocarcinoma, the cancer. What happens when the placenta does not stop its growth? I'm slipping the term here for a second. But it's if the placenta does not stop its rapid growth at a particular time, about the 56th day of conception. Choriocarcinoma, that's the word I'm trying to think of. Choriocarcinoma, it will kill the mother and the baby within a couple of weeks. So something happens, some switch turns on to stop the explosive growth of the placenta. Beard found out it's just when trypsin flooded the bloodstream, a digestive enzyme when there's nothing to digest. So anyway, he first tested his ideas on some animal tumor models that were available at the time, which was called the Jensen's mouth sarcoma. And he injected an extract of trypsin into these mice that were growing cancers, and the tumors would regress. And then subsequently, during the first decade of the previous century, a number of physicians were interested in Beard's hypothesis and began under his direction to use injectable pancreatic enzymes to treat the human cancer patients. And the successes were just abundant, and they were published in the major medical journals of the day, including JAMA here in America and the British Medical Journal. And so this whole enzyme thesis and the supporting animal and the laboratory data just provoked a very angry, as it often does in a lot of professional disciplines, not just medicine, but it seems to congregate in medicine heavily, a very angry backlash against Beard and his followers. And he was just vilified in editorials, in medical journals. He was mocked in newspapers. He was belittled at scientific conventions. But Beard fought back in his articles and his letters to the editor. And in 1911, he published a book, and I have this book at home, The Enzyme Treatment of Cancer. It's a monograph, just outlining his decades of research and its promising and compelling results regarding cancer. But interest in his thesis gradually petered out, unfortunately. And when he died in 1924, he died frustrated and angry and ignored, and his therapy, already considered no more than just some oddity that just happened along the way. But after his death, other physicians and scientists discovered his work and kept the idea alive. And during the 20s and the 30s, there was this physician in St. Louis, Dr. Morse, and he reported that he had successfully treated a number of advanced cancer patients with pancreatic enzymes. And so when he presented his findings to the St. Louis Medical Society, I think it was the early 1930s or 1930s, 1934, something like that, a proceeding published in the Weekly Bulletin of the St. Louis Medical Society, he was immediately attacked by his colleagues. And then during the 60s, some of you are aware of Dr. William Kelly, who rediscovered Beard's work, and Kelly went on. I mean, he was a dentist, but he started treating cancers using the enzyme therapy, and so he's terribly at risk because he's a dentist. He was not legally entitled to treat cancer in the first place, and he was attacked in the press and vilified as a quack and investigated by numerous government agencies. He was thrown in jail as a public menace. had his dental license revoked for 5 years for practicing, medicine. He spent all his earnings defending himself against the government assaults. He saw his family life fall apart, but like Beard, he never relented, and his successes created an extraordinary word-of-mouth network that brought an endless stream of patients to his practice. And Dr. Gonzales, who I started off talking about here, was sent down by Sloan Kettering Hospital. Dr. Good, who was in charge of Sloan Kettering, said, "Hey, I've heard about this guy down in Texas." And he had, at the time, Dr. Good was known as the father of immunology. I mean, that was his position in modern medicine. And he said, I've heard about this guy down there in Grapevine, Texas. Go check him out. And Dr. Gonzales, I think, was in his second year of med school and took the summer off to go check him out. And so under his direction, under Dr. Good's direction, Dr. Gonzales was not doctor at the time, but he went down there and started studying Kelly's patients and his methods and his successes and his failures. And he quickly found all kind of evidence of what appeared to be patient after patient that was appropriately diagnosed, biopsy proven, advanced, and sometimes terminal cancer were still alive 5, even 10 years after they began the enzyme therapy. And so what began as a mere student investigation, evolved into this full-fledged research project, which ended up at the finished all its work and studies at the Children's Hospital in Florida. So Dr. Gonzales eventually evaluated more than 1,000 of Dr. Kelly's patients and concentrated on just a group of 455. And from this population, he wrote up in detail 50 cases representing 26 different kinds of cancer. And even as recently as just a few years ago, Dr. Gonzales wrote that when he would review those cases, he was still impressed by the kinds of achievements that Dr. Kelly had made. And so that it became, Dr. Gonzales started getting some static and some problems, and even though he published a lot of the work that he discovered and found, he still, anytime you offer something new or present something new, some new idea, you're a sitting duck for the status quo to take you out. And so he received an awful lot of static and a lot of opposition from cancer doctors of the day, simply because they were looking for the pharmaceutical magic bullet bomb. They weren't looking for something as simple and inexpensive as enzyme treatment for cancer, regardless of how effective it was. Now, we will shortly be going to break, I think, here. Let me look at the... as I look at my schedule here in front of me, I don't know, maybe we're not. No, we're not. I don't think we have a break until 40 after the hour. So I want to get into some of these cases because these things are incredible. Now our Lee enzymes are simply nutritional support. That's all we offer them for, the trypsin, chymotrypsin. We're not treating cancer by any means. We're just offering them as nutritional support for people with cancer and people without cancer. This is patient number 1. I'm reading from Dr. Gonzales's notes. Patient began chemotherapy with cyclophosphamide, adriamycin, and CAF, a very aggressive protocol, which she tolerated poorly in late 1989. After completing 3 cycles, she refused further treatment, and for several months she did nothing before visiting Stanford in the spring of 1990 for a second opinion. Thereafter, reviewing the previous biopsies and scans, the physicians concurred with the diagnosis of metastatic disease to the liver. The diagnosis is confirmed, and the liver involvement has been documented by the Stanford Pathology Laboratory. Now, she was quite ill at the time, suffering chronic pain in her liver. After returning home and beginning her regimen, the liver pain was so severe she required morphine sulfate for comfort. She also suffered fatigue and malaise lasting many months before she finally began to improve. When I saw her for an evaluation May 1991, a year after she had begun her nutritional protocol, which was the enzyme treatment, she felt much stronger and her abdominal pains had largely resolved. Unfortunately, she began to feel so well that without my knowledge, she subsequently discontinued her protocol, assuming she was cured. In early July 1991, she called me very distraught, having just suffered a grand mal seizure, and admitted she had been offered protocol for several months. A CT scan of the brain revealed a high-density epidural mass in the left sphenoidal ridge and a small low-density area in the right temporoparietal region. And the radiology report reads, quote, both areas were heterogeneously enhanced with contrast medium and appear to be metastatic brain lesions. So after she had stopped her enzyme treatment for her condition, for her liver cancer that had made her feel so much better, suddenly she has a seizure, they do a CT scan, and now she has tumors in her brain. Her doctors immediately recommended radiation to the brain, which patient 1 refused. Instead, she resumed her full nutritional program with renewed dedication, quickly improved, and never had another seizure. Follow-up CT scans of both the head and abdomen in April 1992, less than a year after her reoccurrence, were completely normal. The previously noted liver and brain tumors were gone. The report of the head CT reads, there is no mass or mass effect. There is no evidence of metastatic disease. Normal CT scan of the head. Our last formal contact with her was in October of 2005, when she appeared to be doing fine 15 years after her diagnosis of terminal metastatic breast cancer. In this case, patient number 1 had evidence of liver, brain, and bone metastases, as deadly a combination as can be imagined. But 15 years later, she was still alive at the time this article was written. I want to tell you about patient number 2. And what was the protocol? The protocol was heavy dosages of the enzymes, trypsin and chymotrypsin, plus other enzymes, specifically targeted vitamins and certain kinds of nutritional therapy, depending on the nutritional type of the patient. Dr. Kelly, in his work of many years in Texas with cancer patients, was able to determine there's 10 different metabolic types. People will ask me, what do you think about the blood type diet, type O, type A? Well, it's too general. It's not specific enough. For one thing, there's an awful lot more to it than that. But the spread of 10 goes from a very strict vegetarian to a complete carnivore. And what Dr. Kelly and Dr. Gonzales discovered is that diets that are kind of in the middle of that follow the normal sympathetic, parasympathetic leanings of the central nervous system, the rest and digest, fight or flight, rest and digest, fight or flight. When those things are in balance, people don't get cancer. Under cancer treatment, they may move towards a Gerson-type diet, or they may move towards a carnivore-type diet, because one that will help the one person will certainly hurt. The other diet will hurt. Now, here, patient number 2 is a 72-year-old woman, had been generally in good health when in July 1990 detected the left breast mass. And then it goes through all of the stuff that went on to try to determine what was going on. And what was found was consistent, a well-differentiated mucinous adenocarcinoma of the breast, estrogen and progesterone receptor positive. So I've had many a patient that I've taken care of for different reasons who may concurrently be suffering from a estrogen progesterone driven breast cancer. The pathology report said this: the lesion extends to the margins of the specimen submitted on the lateral and under surface. All right, so after a bone scan, and they just showed that they had some arthritis and some chemotherapy, they underwent a course of intensive multi-agent chemotherapy. They had radiation and a few other things. And then here, however, patient 2, as she later was to tell me, had seen too many people cut to pieces and poisoned only to die, end quote. for her to agree to any further conventional treatment. She refused additional surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, and instead investigated alternative approaches. This reminds me of an oncology nurse that is a patient of our clinic. And I ran this past her. This was maybe a year ago, certainly several months. And I asked her, because it was her job to administer chemotherapy in this oncology clinic. And it's a clinic where, you come in, you lie down on a gurney, they give you an IV while they're administering the chemotherapy, and of course you have lots of candy to taste and consume while you're under this care to keep you happy, which of course will continue to feed the cancer cells because that's exactly what they're looking for. And I asked her, I said, and I talked to her about hard cancers and soft cancers. The soft cancers like lymphoma, blood cancer, or bone cancers, bone marrow cancers, the lymphoma, leukemias, and as opposed to a hard cancer where there's a basement membrane that the cancer cell has to penetrate to get the blood, like breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, kidney cancer, lung, brain. And I said, what happens to those with the hard cancer? Oh, they're goners. I beg your pardon? They're goners. They're going to die? Yes, they're going to die. They're coming in there getting chemo from you. You're administering to them under the direction of the oncologist in the clinic, knowing these people are going to die. Oh, yeah, they're going to die. Will the chemo extend their life? Maybe a little bit in some cases, but they're going to die. The soft cancers, they'll probably get well. How long have you been doing this? For several years. Just like I said, tell me the color of the sky. It looks blue. What happens with these hard cancer patients on chemo? Oh, they're goners. So here, 16 years out from her original diagnosis, she's in excellent health and active with various hobbies and activities. That's this 70-year-old woman with the breast cancer I was just telling you about. Then it says, though these women generally have done very well for a very long period of time, 16 years in the case of this patient, we no longer accept patients with localized breast cancer who do not proceed with recommended surgical procedures. Our decision has not been dictated by a negative clinical experience, but rather the extraordinarily hostile legal environment that exists for alternative practitioners such as ourselves. Standard of care criteria require a woman like patient number 2 to undergo further aggressive surgery, and the world would need a consciousness shift before we would consider taking on such patients again. So they turned, if you have a cancer that has been diagnosed by biopsy or whatever, and you are advised to have surgical procedures as a result of the diagnosis, he stopped taking those patients because of what comes down on them by moving outside the standard of care, even though their patients survive for years and years and years. But they just won't take them anymore. Who does he take? He takes people who think they might have cancer, but have not gone through a full medical diagnosis yet, that hear about their clinic and want to go check out something alternative before they start getting cut, poisoned, and burned. Patient number 3 is a 14-and-a-half-year survivor. Patient 3 is a 62-year-old woman with a long history of fibrocystic breast disease, first diagnosed when she was 19. Thereafter, her doctors followed her closely with frequent mammography and 2 biopsies showing benign changes. As is the case with most women with fibrocystic lumps in their breasts, they're benign. In 1991, mammography again indicated dense fibrocystic breasts as well as a new 1 centimeter nodular density in the upper and axillary portions of the right breast, meaning towards the armpit. This contains internal microcalcifications and blah, 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 blah. At that point, in the spring of 1992, Patient number 3 underwent needle biopsies of 8 lesions, 4 of which proved positive for ductal carcinoma. Since she had diffuse disease throughout the breast, her surgeon insisted she needed mastectomy. However, the patient decided to refuse all further surgery and any other conventional treatment, instead opting for our regimen. This patient first consulted me in 1992. She had on exam very dense nodular breasts, but seemed otherwise good health. I encouraged her to reconsider surgery, for which early-stage breast cancer often can be curative. In a calm and determined way, she explained her decision to refuse disfiguring surgery or toxic conventional treatment, whether I chose to be her doctor or not. So I agreed to treat her. She subsequently followed her regimen diligently, and over the years she has done extremely well, though declining all further testing. Today, she adheres to a maintenance protocol and appears to be in excellent health 14 and a half years from her biopsy diagnosis. As in the case with number 2, Dr. Isaacs and I most likely would not agree to treat a patient like this today. The legal climate for alternative medicine remains repressive. The power and authority of conventional medicine, despite its well-documented and rather glaring limitations, is formidable. However, I am gratified by the success of patients 2 and 3 and the others like them in our practice who were able to avoid all aggressive surgery as well as toxic drug and radiation treatments. They still have their breasts, their lives, and their health. Now, a couple of more of these. Patient number 4, 67-year-old woman who had been in good health when routine mammography in October of 91 revealed a suspicious breast mass. They removed a 2.1 centimeter tumor confirmed as in situ and infiltrating ductal carcinoma. This is not a good kind of breast cancer, as if there is any. The patient did meet with a surgeon. There was a bone lesion in the upper part of the femur in one of her legs. And she did meet with the orthopedic surgeon about it, who suggested a course of aggressive surgery with hip replacement and radiation to the hip. Her breast surgeon insisted that she proceed with mastectomy followed by radiation to the chest wall. However, after learning our approach, patient number 4 refused all further conventional interventions, choosing instead to proceed with my treatment. And then he talks about what the treatment was, which again is the heavy dosages of these enzymes, vitamins, minerals, those kinds of things. This article is available at Dr. Isaac's website, the article that I am quoting from here because it's a copyrighted article, the Gonzales Therapy and Cancer. And Dr. Isaac's website I'm looking for here at the moment to tell you. Her name is spelled Isaccs, Dr. Linda Isaacs. You could probably just do a Google search. She has moved her office from Manhattan to Austin, Texas. Probably the climate was too hot there. But anyway, it says in May of 1992, 5 months after patient number 4 began her treatment with me, showed, according to the report, quote, no definite evidence of metastatic disease. 4 months later. A follow-up scan in June of 93 was again clear, and today, nearly 15 years after she first consulted me, patient number 4 remains compliant with her full regimen and disease-free. Her case is very straightforward. At the time of diagnosis, a bone scan and MRI documented a large tumor in her hip that regressed. Let me make sure I got the right page here. While she followed only the nutritional program. A median survival of 2.4 years for women with breast cancer metastatic to the bone is considered normal. You have breast cancer and suddenly it's in the bones, 2.5 years of life remain. This is, what was she, 15 years later? 15 years later, she was still alive. I would recommend that you might listen to podcast number 5. 95, a story of incurable cancer, a survivor's story of incurable cancer. It's one of our mentors who was diagnosed with incurable cancer, and what he did, and that's almost 20 years ago. Yeah. Was it 2006 he was diagnosed? I thought he was diagnosed earlier than that. I think he was officially diagnosed in 06, but he had symptoms as early as 02 or 03, something like that. But in 06, he was finally diagnosed. And the process he went through with enzymes and some other things, and he's very much alive today. And he is in our podcast number 95, A Survivor's Story of Incurable Cancer. And what he did to be able to make it, his protocol is there, the nutritional support that he did. Now that's, we're not offering that in a sense of treatment by any means, but it's what he did to get to that stage. And I've got some more notes here. We're going to go to break in a minute, and I'll get a phone call, and then I will talk to you some more about this, because there are some more interesting, and I've told you 4 of 50 cases that have responded incredibly well to this. Now, I started off by talking about the cancer cells self-destruct when you stop the sweet tooth. I want to work my way back around toward that again after the break is over, but the Lee enzymes that we offer in our clinic are just simply nutritional support. We have patients using them that are having wonderful results with diabetes, heartburn, digestive problems, sugar balancing problems, and such. And but I want to get back to Dr. Chi Van Dang, the MD, PhD director of hematology at Johns Hopkins. And he was one of the primary investigators as to, I just got through telling you how Dr. Gonzales was able to deal with the cancer in these patients of a terminal cancer. What I'm talking about now is what is causing this stuff. And when they experimented, they just came right out and said, listen, cancer cells are incredible sugar junkies. And they'll self-destruct when deprived of glucose, which is, of course, their biological sweet of choice. All lines are full. We're going to go to break here in just a moment, and then I'll get you on after the break. But he said this, the change when we took away glucose was dramatic. By the next day, we knew very quickly that the cells we had altered to resemble cancers were dying off in large numbers. Now, the people who research this stuff have long suspected that cancer cells' heavy reliance on glucose, which is its main source of strength and vitality, could be one of its great weaknesses. Because it responds so well to something, that could be its greatest weakness. Take it away. And so the new results were, again, the best indication of the effectiveness of that idea. So the results of that study that were published that year in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science suggested that drugs that cut off the glucose supply might be a potent way of fighting cancer, and with very few ill effects on the healthy tissues. So I'll get into a little more of that in your phone calls very shortly this Wednesday morning. And I've been talking about cancer. I've been talking about it because I get there are several conditions I'm constantly asked for by my patients in the clinic for more understanding and more knowledge, and I refer to them to we have a bunch of podcasts at forbiddendoctor.com on the subject of cancer, but probably Corey, I'm sorry, I cut you off. If you can call me back. I'm in such a cramped little space here. One of the questions that I'm asked about constantly is cancer. As you know, we have a rather high level of cancer in this state, and I think you can guess why. With all the cookies, with all the Jell-O, with all the donuts, A lot of people simply do not have a choice one way or the other. Now, I was asked, and ice cream especially. So I cut off Corey. He called in to ask about hyperbaric chambers and oxygen. Well, as I started this whole discussion almost 2 hours ago, was the idea that cancer cells, their food is sugar, and they hate oxygen. So you usually find cancer cells growing in an anaerobic condition. And anytime you use oxygen, and some cancer therapies will involve hyperbaric chambers. You go into these chambers for maybe as much as an hour, and they raise the atmospheric pressure by 1.5 atmospheres, maybe 2. I tried one once, 20-some years ago, and I thought it was a rather interesting experience. Is this Corey?
It is.
Corey, I'm awfully sorry that I cut you off.
No worries.
I flipped over the phone here. So you had a question about hyperbaric chambers.
Yeah, just my understanding was it sounds like oxygen has a similar effect to sugar. That's what made me think about it, because I had heard that oxygen was a good process to use to try and fight cancer. And I just wanted maybe your input or understanding of that.
Yes. Well, cancer cells are poorly differentiated. They're rapidly growing cells that live off the fermentation of sugar that produces carbon dioxide. And they hate oxygen. Oxygen greatly retards their growth if it doesn't kill them. But one thing that certainly does kill cancer cells is to cut off its energy source, which is glucose, sugar in almost any form.
Does that include like fruit sugars and honey?
Any sugar. So
Okay.
What is a sugar? If it didn't come from a face, if it came off of a tree, a vine, a bush, under the ground, if it grew and it did not have a face on it, it's sugar. It may be a complex one, like some carbohydrates, a complex carbohydrate like broccoli, or it may be a rather simple sugar that occurs in fruit juices. An orange, for example, a tree-ripened orange, half of the sugar in that orange is sucrose, table sugar. Maple syrup, half of the sugar in maple syrup is sucrose, table sugar. It's not processed, but it still ends up as glucose in the bloodstream. So here, if you can understand this, whether you eat a salad that has broccoli in it and cabbage and romaine lettuce or something like that, and some cherry tomatoes and red onion and the different things that we put into a salad, or you have a chocolate chip cookie, at the end of the day, they are both glucose in the bloodstream. That salad of carbohydrates will break down eventually into glucose. Now, that salad has some vitamins with it and some enzymes and some things in it that are good for you. There's no issue about it. The chocolate chip cookie has nothing in it except a few traces of cacao in the chocolate that might be good for you. The chocolate chip cookie by weight is far more detrimental than the salad. But at the end of the day, they both will be glucose in the bloodstream. So when I say you have to cut off all sugar, you have to cut off any form of food that becomes sugar, because that's what the cancer cell will use to live on. Now, it doesn't take glucose into it like a normal cell will take in glucose through the process of glycolysis, generate energy in the mitochondria. The cancer cell will take that and ferment it and create a byproduct of the glucose through fermentation, of which it lives off of a very, very simple, primitive chemical compound that keeps that cancer cell alive. So the first thing, according to Johns Hopkins Cancer Research Centers, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, is you simply cut off the supply of glucose. What does that leave? Something with a face, or something that came from something with a face. Meat, fish, dairy, and eggs, and spices. Spices are essential to the digestion of animal-based protein fat food sources. Now, someone will say, well, what about the lactose, the sugar that's in milk? You want to be very, very careful with that. With raw milk, doesn't seem to be that big of a problem. But if I had a very advanced case of cancer, I would not be drinking any milk either, even though I drink raw milk. I would cut out any form of sugar I could possibly find. I would do, if I didn't have access to hyperbaric chambers, I would do some real serious deep breathing 2 or 3 times a day, just to further oxygenate my blood supply. Does this help any? Oh, you're gone. No, well, okay. Well, I hope you're satisfied with what I had to say there. Now, there is a certain gene, the CMYC levels in the cell medium, when they would bathe these cells with this gene, when there was no glucose present, the cancer cells immediately started destroying themselves through the cell suicide process called apoptosis. And the cells that they hadn't altered through this genetic introduction, they would stay in the current condition. Healthy cells would stay fine in all other regards and remain healthy. And so they produced similar results by exposing these types of cells to a particular compound that resembles sugar. It's called 2-deoxyglucose. But it disrupts glycolysis. It stops glycolysis from taking place, the process that produces the energy from the sugar. And when they used human tumor samples, the 2-oxyglucose killed some cell lines, but it spared others. And the key factor appears to be this particular suicide-stopping gene that cancer cells are able to get around. Apoptosis is the normal process of the death of a cell. Cells are born to die. Some cells live longer than other cells. Nerve cells live very long. The cells that line the gut wall live 3 to 5 days. Apoptosis is the process of cell suicide. Cancer cells are able to avoid apoptosis. But when they found some of the stuff that they deal with here now is some of the experiments with different kinds of chemical compounds, but there's not any money in it. They're very effective for triggering apoptosis inside these cells, but there's very, very little money in it. And if there's not a lot of money, I mean, cancer is one of the biggest businesses in America. And they're not going to let that business go out the window. All right. I've got only a couple of minutes left. I want to mention a couple more things about cashback because it is coming to America and will be everywhere within 4 to 5 years from now. You will have it on your phone in 4 to 5 years from now. You will do it because all the big box stores and the local mom and pop stores will be offering you deals you can't pass up without it. Now, this is below ground level in its development here. I'm bringing it to the Salt Lake area. If you want to be part of something that will involve 100 million Americans by 2024, this is the wave that's coming here. And I don't say this lightly, but you can make more money than you can imagine by getting involved in this now. There's no investment. There's nothing to buy. There's no products to buy. You just help people discover this means of shopping. You create a network by yourself doing this, and you actually get paid on what other people are spending for shopping for things they would be shopping for anyway. Like what? Gas, food, clothes, home repair, auto repair, insurances, entertainment, vacations, travel, airlines. They're all in the system already. You just make money by getting people to understand this and to use the cashback app. And I don't say this lightly, but I wouldn't be interested in this myself otherwise. I mean, how would you like to be making $25,000 a month within about 6 months of starting this? I mean, what full-time job after working 6 months is going to be making $25,000 a month? Now, I'm already on my way in that direction. I've only been doing it for 1 month, and I've been around a long time, everybody, and I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like this. Never. Well, but I'm only looking for the best of the best. If you'll work closely with me, you can text me personally at 801-810-6029. 801-810-6029. or you can go to whynotgetcashback.com, watch some videos. But I need to put together a group within a week, and you'll be working directly with me, possibly daily. And who am I looking for? As I said earlier, someone who simply longs for the immensity of the sea. They're tired of sitting there on the shoreline. They don't know how to build a boat. You don't have to know how to build a boat. You just want to get off the island and see where the sea can take you. And the vision to understand that is what I'm talking about. So cashback right now is where Bitcoin was when it was 7 cents. Right now it's over 10,000. Cashback today is where Amazon Prime was when everybody laughed at paying $95 for free delivery. I mean, it didn't make any sense, but Bezos knew what he was doing. But now anybody that shops with Amazon probably has Prime. Now, the reality is that you're going to have this app eventually. Now you can do it, make some money, or later when your favorite store is already passing them out, but then it'll be too late to realize any good income from it. So once again, 801-810-6029. You can get in touch with me. Mary and I use that number for contact.
The statements made in this podcast about specific products have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided or any information contained on or in any product label or packaging or this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. Thank you for listening to this forbidden information and our forbidden podcast. Join us next time for another in-depth discussion of forbidden knowledge. We will see you then.